Good evening, everyone. Good evening. Tonight is Woke Wednesdays. We do this every single Wednesday, 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Thank you for tuning in. Tonight we're talking about a very, very important topic that I think is often just kind of taken for granted, which is reading. And to have this conversation, we have an amazing individual on the show. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Hello, everyone. My name is Eric Gavin. I'm currently a product designer, but I'm also an attorney. We'll be discussing reading today, and I promise to not make it boring as shit. I will do my best to make sure that everybody's interested, and if you have any questions about books that I've read or anything that I'll be getting into in the next couple months with books, I'll be more than willing to talk to y'all about it for sure.
Absolutely. So if this is your first time tuning in, please feel free to ask any questions, pose any comments. Tonight we're talking about a topic that I think is extremely important, and Eric will be breaking down his approach to books, why he started reading, why it's important, who can read. We're going to talk about a lot of things tonight. So let's get started, man.
For sure.
Why do we think that reading is oftentimes considered to be just this boring thing?
Oh, school, man.
Yeah.
It starts in school. And you and me were just talking about it a second ago before the whole thing started. If y'all can remember the little scholastic school things used to come around when you were in grade school, and you used to see those, and you used to get excited, and you used to see the books, and you may or may not could afford it, so you were looking through the books, and oh, this is so cool.
Yeah.
And over time, that idea of what a book was about changed for you based upon if a teacher forced you to read it. I mean, if somebody forces you to do anything, not just reading, you're not really going to like what's happening with that. And just kind of what that meant for you as you kind of went along. For me, I wasn't super huge on reading throughout high school because it was lame, and people was like, yo, you can't be reading, this is not good for you. So I moved on to sports, and that's why I ended up doing track a lot heavier during that time. But I was always in the back of my mind oh man, reading is cool, and I really like reading, and I want to get back to it. But school and teachers and peer pressure kind of made that go away, and it wasn't really helpful or good.
That's real, man. I mean, we were just talking before the show. I was telling you that I thought reading was for white kids. I didn't my other friends, kids of color, whatever, if they were reading, be yo, stop being white.
Yeah.
So whiteness was kind of just, reading was attributed to whiteness. So there's this racial, definitely, component. And there's just many reasons why people don't read today. We were just looking up statistics about literacy levels in the United States.
Yeah.
32 million Americans cannot read.
Yeah.
That's wild.
Yeah.
32 million Americans. And another statistic said that 29% of Americans read at a basic reading level. 29%. That's a lot. That's a third of the country, almost a third.
Exactly.
So this is very serious. But what got you started on reading?
So it was in my year off, right? It was between undergrad and college, and
law school.
Before law school, right?
Before law school. Okay.
Before law school. 4 or 5 years ago.
Okay.
And I was getting ready to figure out was I going to do master's degree, or was I going to do something else that was a little bit more work oriented. I didn't really know what I was going to go do. But I had this year off where I was just preparing for whatever that next step was while I was doing work in the not-for-profit sector and doing stuff on midterm elections. What I found out was during that time I had a whole bunch of time. I would finish my job and I have half the day left. So I was experimenting with new things. I was I'm going to meditate. I'm going to do this Tai Chi thing, and I'm going to learn karate by myself and shit. It was a whole bunch of stuff that I was really trying to get into.
Yeah.
But what really stuck was this reading. So I was in Ann Arbor, so I was in Michigan. Mm-hmm. It was a college town, and in college towns, especially one in Ann Arbor, Michigan, there's a whole bunch of places to go to get a book. First, it was the library for me, because we have an enormous library, and then it started to be the bookstore that was around there. So I had a little change saved up from the things that I was doing in those and that not-for-profit work. And I just started like getting books that I thought were super duper interesting. And I think it struck me one day when I went past this math book, this calculus book. And I was like, yo, I never touched that. Like, I don't want to touch anything of that nature. And it was that fear of like not being able to learn something, and I didn't know why. So because at that time I was preparing for law school, and I was doing like the LSAT, which is whack. Like, this doesn't have anything to do with anything. But it hit me, and I was like, why am I scared to read this thing? Like, it's nothing wrong. I don't like lose any credit. There's no grade to gain. Like, there's nothing. I don't know why I'm fearful of information now. So I picked it up, and I started reading it, and I started going into it. And to be honest, I never finished that book. But what was important is that it stopped being such a barrier for me to learn other things. So then I started like reading a little bit more. So I wasn't doing what I'm doing now, which is like a really aggressive schedule of reading. But at the time, like that, I was like a book a month, and it was really nice. It was a good pace, and that's why I got more into like reading on a more regular basis.
So when you started law school, did you stop reading?
I did,
for pleasure.
I did, because law school almost killed it for me. Like, all
you
you do is like read cases all day, y'all. And I don't know if you have lawyer friends, but pray for them, because all they have to do is read stuff that has nothing to do with what they're actually going to end up doing eventually. Even if they do end up doing criminal, and they've been doing criminal stuff the whole time, they're reading a whole bunch of stuff that might not even matter anymore, because it's out of it's not relevant anymore. It's not good law anymore. So all of that just really led to me just like branching out from that, and it just wasn't good. I just,
Well, I see new folks getting on. Tonight we're talking about reading. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask, pose any comments. We have Eric here, who is absolutely amazing, and he's taking us through his journey of reading, why he kind of started reading. So, but what about after law school then? You said law school almost killed you.
Right.
And then post law school, I was telling you before, I remember seeing you post on your Instagram some notes here and there.
Yeah.
I'm reading this.
So,
that.
So law school ended, and I finished the bar exam, and I felt like free, like for real. Like I felt like I had gained a new life and stuff. And once that ended, all I had been doing that whole entire time was not reading. I had just been doing questions and everything like that. I had not been doing any reading for like 3 or 4 months. So when I got done, and I was just sitting up one day, my friend Octavia Yearwood, she had a book that come out. She's like, Eric, would you like support my book and everything? I was like, for sure, I'll get it. And so I got it, and I started reading that book, and I had some other books on my shelves that I wanted to read, so I started reading that book, and then I started reading that book, and that's when I started taking pictures of it. And at the time, I wanted to do something that was going to like put content out, and I didn't know what it was going to be. And to be honest, it was you that kind of inspired a lot of it, because you started doing this. And I was like,
thank you.
No, give him some props, y'all, because he actually went out and did that thing without any prompting from anybody. He just went up and started something. That's like, it's hard to do. I know it's not easy to do.
You know what
I'm saying? So being on that, I was like, yo, I could do this. Like, I'm already reading. I just got to take some pictures about it and stuff like that. And I'm not really on Instagram like that. Like, but I could take some pictures though. Yeah. And so I just started taking pictures of it. We started rolling into me being a little bit more structured with it. I was already taking notes, but I just started being more intentional about like, maybe other people want to read my notes. So like, let me make sure that it makes sense a little bit. And then just kind of rattling off things that would make a little bit more sense in a wider context. So when I write stuff now, sometimes it's for me. Like, there's things that I do when I start a new book, and that's stuff that I write for myself. But then there's other things that I know that are really helpful for people that are like, yo, like, what the hell did that book mean? Do I need to read that book? Because one thing is that you can get caught up with a bad book, and it's like, damn, I wish I would read that book. But if somebody wanted to ask me, I'm like, yo, don't read that book. Like, you don't need to spend your time on that. And my friend made a really good point. You could waste 2 hours on a bad movie. You might end up wasting a week on a bad book. A week. It's not really a week, but it feels like a week. Because you probably spend less than 2 hours reading the book, but you might feel like it's a lot of time, you know? So
you said you started reading one book, that led to another book. reading in and of itself is I find it to be difficult.
Yeah.
Right? I remember it took me a long time to realize that, if I read the introduction to... I used to always skip the introduction.
Yeah.
If I read the introduction, it usually has kind of an outline of the entire book.
For sure.
Right? So, kind of started learning tricks here and there.
Yeah.
So at first, were you just kind of just reading, like, word for word? How did you kind of approach the books? And maybe for people who are maybe thinking about starting to read, what are kind of some tips that when you first approach a book?
So, like, start with a book like this. You see how thin this book is? Like, this book is not, like, thick at all. And you don't got to feel bad about choosing books that you feel like might be trashy or, like, not be great. Because for instance, I talk to my sister about books from time to time. And she's like, I'm just reading this trashy book, XYZ thing. But, I mean, if stories transport you and take you a place, then you shouldn't feel bad about that. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's a good
real,
way
man.
to, like, actually gain that thing. And if that's, like, starts to catapult you into reading different things, you don't need to be reading dissertations on, saving children like that. You don't need to do all that. Like, I mean, I don't know. Like,
I think that's one thing that, at least for us, graduate school, like, I'm constantly reading very dense
man,
material.
and it's beautiful.
Yeah, absolutely.
Somebody needs to be taking in that knowledge. But damn, like,
also,
every single person who's thinking about reading shouldn't be trying to read all these books that have to make you learn something. Or you don't have to read a book that's about self-improvement. You could just read a book because you want to know something different. Or you could read a book because it's like has a really good story. I read books, and I used to read books like, I need to learn something from the book. If I don't gain something from this book, then I've lost something. Like, that's how I used to feel about all my books that I was reading. I was like, if it's not self-improvement, then why am I reading the book? But then when I started reading storybooks, I'm like, this helps me reflect on things. This helped me gain stuff. So
real quick, let me ask you this. Because we're talking about a book, like, in its entirety.
Yeah.
You ever, like, open a book and, like, the first page is boring as fuck, and it's like, I'm good.
Yes.
Like,
yes, bro. Yes. All the time. And, I mean, you can't be afraid to, like, let a book go. Like, you didn't quit on a book. Like, the book didn't hit you where it needed to hit you. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm pretty good about spotting books that I like now, so that doesn't happen very often. But when I was starting, like, I picked up a book. I like psychology, y'all. And so I picked up a book on this form of, like, evolutionary psychology. I'm like, ooh, I'm going to learn some new aspect on this thing. I opened up the book, 10 pages in, I was like, I can't. I put it down. I was like, I can't do this. I'm like, I don't think this book is right, and I don't know what the hell they're talking about. Like, I can't do this book. And I put the book away, and I never picked it up again. I don't feel bad about it. I didn't lose anything from it. I gained not having to go through that book and try to force myself to do it. Because it goes back again to what we were talking about with teachers. Like, reading doesn't have to be an obligation, and it doesn't have to be something that you feel is, like, has to happen. It just could be something that you do in order to gain something or gain some insight from. Or it can support you in things that you would like to do. You just have to choose what your aim is with reading. You know what I'm saying? Like, it could be for pleasure, it could be to help you, or it could just be something that you do. And all of those things are okay.
And also, reading a book doesn't mean you have to read every single word on every single page.
No, it doesn't.
Sometimes for me, reading a book is like, I read chapter 1. Oh, you know what? I see chapter 7 might spark some interest. Okay. And I read maybe 3 chapters out of the entire book. Yeah. And I'm like, all right, cool. I got the main point. I understand the arguments.
And that's okay.
Just keep it moving.
And that's okay. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm at a point where I like to go from end to end of the book, but everybody doesn't have to do that. Like, another book, actually, this book right here, Interpreter of Maldives by, I forgot how to say her name, Jhumpa Lahiri?
Maybe, yeah.
I don't know. I really like this book anyway. Even though I just butchered her name, I apologize. It has short stories in it. And the short stories are, like, really, really good on capturing attention and capturing, like, what it is that somebody would like to understand about her culture. Because I didn't know a lot about
Where's
culture.
She from?
From Southeast Asia?
Yeah,
southern parts of Asia.
India?
Yeah, in India. And being able to, like, understand her culture through that was, like, really, really great. But you could just jump through it and jump to the end of the book if you wanted to, and you'd have been fine. And with certain books, that's okay. If there's something you need to learn from a book, if you open up in chapter 5 and you found it and you got it, leave the book. Then you're done. Yeah. You know what I'm saying?
So basically, there's not this commitment.
Yeah,
that you have to make.
Like people like you marrying a book, dog. Like you don't have to marry books.
And I know some of y'all got commitment issues.
You know what I'm saying? I got my own issues too, man. Like I have my own issues too. I be feeling like, man, like. I open this book up. I got to do something with this book. I got to take this book with me everywhere I go. This book is mine, and the book, I'm the book. Like all of that stuff. Like you don't. It doesn't have to be that serious.
I will say this though. I always keep a book in my car, and I always keep a book
in a bag. That's weird. But I keep a book in my bag.
In a bag or in my car.
A book in my
you never know when like you have to wait on a friend for like 10, 15 minutes.
Real.
You know,
you can crack a book and you be fine. You know what I'm saying? And so like let me mention another thing. We're talking about books, but this is about reading. You could read articles. You know what I'm saying? Like you could read pamphlets. Like if you feel like there is a vacuum in your understanding about something, it doesn't require a huge commitment in order to get into a book. It just requires you to be interested enough in the thing to go look for it and search for it. The internet is good for searching for things, but it's not really good for actually like diving in to gain insights from stuff. And you have to be able to decipher when it's like a good time to pick up a book or when it's a good time to like actually go and like
read an article
or something else. Because I read articles all day, but sometimes articles don't do it for me. So I have to go to a book in order to get some insight from stuff.
Real quick, let me ask you a question. We got a question here from GS_WOD.
For sure.
Good evening, guys. What advice would you give to someone who doesn't like to read books without pictures? And has reading helped you accomplish anything in your personal life other than academically?
Oh, that's a good question. Yeah. If you don't want to read books without pictures, then you don't have to read books without pictures. Like you can continue to go get books. Like there are plenty of really good books that have pictures in it. But I also would say I would wean either that person or myself off of books with pictures by like progressively getting to things that have less pictures in it. For instance, if I was really big on, let's say a good book that I know, that
has pictures.
Yeah.
I don't know, but I am curious though. Like, what? It does make me think. What is wrong with a book with pictures?
Nothing. Right? It goes back to like a little bit of when you read a book. There's a certain level of an appearance or an image that we have of the person when it gets the book, right? Yeah. So it's like. I get this book and I have this big book right now. You're like, he's smart. He knows things. Like, he got like something going for him. But at the same time, like this, I could be not really reading the book. Like I could not be understanding what's happening.
You could just be carrying it around.
I could just be carrying the book around, yo. But if you feel compelled about reading a book and it like scares you a bit to actually read the book because it has pictures in it, because you're afraid about how people are going to perceive you for that book, like. That's understandable, and maybe you want to read within the confines of like your home or where you feel safe and where you're okay. There's nothing wrong with that, but you should also know there's nothing wrong with you choosing a book that's based upon like the fact that it has pictures in it. You know what I'm saying? Like that's the type of stuff, and that's the type of information that it really speaks to you. You get information visually, or at least it sticks with you more visually, and that's okay. If you would like to not do read in books that have pictures anymore, you need to get really good books that give you the ability to create the image yourself. So there are books that are going to do a really good job of building up imagery. Like as funny as it is, Harry Potter did a really good job of that. As like long as those books were, they were so detailed that I could start to see aspects of what was happening in the image, in the thing. So I don't need to see a picture because J.K. Rowling is painting a picture for me with her words.
Call that rich descriptions.
Sir. So it's just like it gets to a point where the author's doing a really good job of painting a picture for me that allows me to be able to create images myself. Absolutely. So if I'm a visual person, maybe it's hard for me to crank through a lot of those books. Yeah. But I don't need to. You don't need to crank through books because why? Like there's no.
You're not in competition.
You're not in competition with anybody. Yeah. Just because I'm reading a book a week doesn't mean you need to read a book a week.
You know what's crazy? So anyone who knows me knows I'm constantly reading, right?
Of course.
So I am in school. But I think a couple months ago I started reading a book that I started when I was a kid. It's called Ender's Shadow. It's based off Ender's Game.
Yeah.
It's a parallel series. A sci-fi book. I'm not a sci-fi person at all, but this book just literally, I would finish reading some like dense philosophy, and I literally couldn't wait not to go to Netflix, which I love Netflix, but to go read this book.
Yeah.
And I would read 3 chapters like in one sitting. You know, it might take me 20 minutes, 30 minutes, but the descriptions, like their ability just to describe.
Yeah.
I literally felt like I was there. I really don't know how to explain that. It was something powerful.
I'm just saying.
So I think that's an amazing point. We do have a lot of questions, Eric.
Oh, okay.
So let me get to the next one.
I definitely didn't get the last part of her question.
Oh, yeah, please. Okay. Yeah, has it helped you in something other than academics?
Definitely. I read a book by Thich Nhat Hanh. It's called Communication. He's a monk. I'll have to sing all the name. But it was about communication, and I literally understood where my father was coming from better because I read that book. And specific to that, he talked a lot about understanding not only that your parents are a person, but that your parents are persons that have gone through very similar things that are being reflected upon how they do with you. And you hear that and you're like, of course, Eric, duh. But in reading it, I really was able to reflect on it. And that's what I'm saying when I say books give you insight and not necessarily just a knowledge. Because sometimes it gets you to a point where that's when you needed to understand a thing. Which is if I have anything that I need to say tonight that's the most important thing you need to know, I would say that books are about timing, not about the information that are within it. It's when you get to that book that the thing actually starts to speak to you and says something about what you are and what it can mean to you.
Absolutely. I think it's very well said. Real quick, I see a lot of people getting on. What is your Instagram page? Because you do have an Instagram page for reading.
Okay.
With books.
Yes, it's Potential Growth Club.
Okay.
And I called it that because I wanted it to be about a person's growth, both professionally and personally, and not about the books themselves. Like, books are dope, y'all. I love books. I love books to death. But everything's not about the book. It's about you growing through the book and you actually being able to gain insights and understand stuff about yourself from the book. If you read 2 pages of this book and you're like, yo, I have this idea. I need to play on this.
Yep.
Forget the book. Just go play on that. Do your thing. It's not about the book. It's about what you get from it, and it's about what you grow from those things. And if you read one book and you never read a book again, I think you're missing out. But I also would say act on things and act on how you feel and what you know. And then when you feel like you're in a place where you can grow again, come back to the book and then start growing again.
All right, Eric, let's go through this question.
Let's do it.
Number 1, what do you mean by vacuum? You said vacuum earlier. If you're reading in a vacuum.
Vacuum earlier.
You said that earlier. All right, if you remember, we'll come back.
I'm reading in a vacuum.
Oh, they said never mind. All right.
Okay.
What's your preference on reading on an electronic platform versus on paper?
Oh my gosh. So I used to love reading on my Kindle. It was dope. I was like, I could bring 1,000 books with me in my hands. It was dope to me because I was traveling a lot for track. And I used to read from time to time. And it was really dope when I was traveling a bit during that year off that I had. But it's just something about having a physical copy of a book that gets me ingrained into what's happening in that book. Let alone when I have thoughts, I hate having to type stuff out in the Kindle. I could just write it in the book. Mm-hmm. So I was just talking about this earlier. I do have a journal that I track every single thing in, which I got from a book. Not just things that happen in the book, but things that happen in my life, period. It's all in one book. So stuff that happens in a book will go in there. But I don't put everything in that book. I put a lot of stuff just in the book itself. If you ever get a book from me, it's gonna have a whole bunch of writing in it because I write it throughout the books that are in that. That's a storybook, so that's a lot less. Yeah. But there's a whole bunch of writing that are in the corners of the books because I want to remember stuff as I found it when I got there. Not to mention a lot of these books, especially like this one, I'm gonna read again once a year. It's already on track. I already got it because I'm gonna come back to it and I'm gonna add to it and everything. So I like paper for that reason.
Yeah, and I had a professor tell me one time, if you're not reading with a pencil or with a pen, then you're not reading. And the reason being is because for me, I circle words that I don't know. So actually I have 3 personal dictionaries. So anytime I don't know a word, I circle it and I go look it up and I write it in my own little dictionary that I'm creating. It's like a small little book, empty little journal, and I write the name, the word, and the definition. And anytime I come across that word again, I'm like, oh yeah, I remember I wrote it down. And now, not only does that build my vocabulary, but I also now have this little dictionary that I created.
The brother's better than me, y'all. He creating dictionaries out here. I ain't doing all that.
That stuff is helpful, I think, just for anybody who's learning, just trying to build a vocabulary, all this stuff, really important. Because sometimes we tend to read and skip over the word that we don't know.
Yeah.
And one good trick when it comes to reading, I don't know if you do this, sometimes if I'm reading silently, I will definitely skip over words and I might miss the point. Mm-hmm. So a good way to slow down your reading, is to literally read out loud. Because then you definitely know when you skipped a word. So, and I got some of these tips from How to Read a Book. It's a book called How to Read a Book. I think you got it too, right?
Yeah, I do got it.
Yeah. Really great. I didn't read the whole thing. I read half the book and that was enough for me, and I just kept going.
And I mean, look, like, even if you can, you're like, Eric, I can't read out loud. It's like, that's okay. You got a finger. You can use that, and you just go out across the page.
Finger, like, pencil.
It's supposed. What we want to do is get away from the friction of the information getting to you. Like, the book is the medium to get the information to you so you can understand something. And all we want is for you to get to a point where the information is just coming to you very easily, and you're able to take it in and sit with it so that it sits on your spirit, so that it can say something to you. And if it doesn't, then it doesn't, and it just goes by.
So here's a question. How do you feel about, sometimes people tend to believe that, because it's in a book, it's true. So then what I usually do is, what I encourage people to do too, is get in an argument with the author. Like, do you accept what they're saying? Do you not? Do you agree? Why? Kind of get in conversation with them. What do you think?
So I have two things that I do. One, I normally take that approach, but for people that are not able to have a lot of like mental ammo in order to argue against an author, it's hard to do. Like, when somebody's done their research, it's really hard to say, I think that might be wrong, because nothing clicks. You're just like, that sounds about right, and I'm trying to read it to understand something, so I'm okay with it.
Great point, yeah.
So what you will want to do in that situation is, and what I've been doing is, when I read one book by somebody, I read something by somebody else who says something different. And that way...
the same topic.
Either the same topic or a similar author, so that I can start to compare notes. Because once you start reading similar things, or reading things on the same topic again and again, you start seeing similarities and you start seeing contrast. So when somebody says something different, you can ask yourself, which one made more sense? Was it the person who was saying this and saying all these things, or was the person saying this and all these things? That's really for an academic purposes, if you're really trying to come up for theoretical things, because you're not going to have that issue with the story.
Yeah.
But if we're talking about academics, like, I'm gonna keep asking myself, like, is the things that, not authors, but let's say if Martin Luther King and Malcolm X wrote books, right, and they were academics as far as they were going back and forth, I'm gonna read maybe I like Malcolm more, so I keep reading Malcolm. I have to get over to Martin, because I need to understand Malcolm's in context to what's happening with the two, so that I could get a little bit of understanding about what Malcolm's message is in its entirety.
And one book I would recommend by Martin Luther King is Where Do We Go From Here? Great book he wrote. I think he wrote 3 in total.
I think he did.
So yeah. Another question for you.
Shoot.
How do you feel about audiobooks? And or what are your thoughts on reading a book while listening to the audiobook?
How do I feel about all my books?
Audio.
Audiobooks.
Yeah, audiobooks. Yeah.
I think audiobooks are good. I know a lot of people who are like, I simply don't have the time. I like to do it in my commute. Like, this is good for me. I will say that I don't like calling audiobooks because it's just a reading of the book. But again, it's not really about how you're getting the information. It's about the fact that you're getting the information. And I applaud you for getting the information in any type of way. Because if you don't have the time to sit down and read, like, let's say you have children and you have a home and you know that your home is like a safe place for you, but it's not a quiet place for you. Like, or you have roommates or anything like that. Like, people have different life situations. If that's something that's problematic for you, like, I applaud you for going and getting the information in any way that you have to. What I will say is that I think when we read things, it sticks. Just like when we write things, it sticks. There's certain types of ways that we get information in, and they stick better when we do that. Just like when you type something out, you're more likely, it's proven, you're more likely to remember something if you write it with your hand and pen than if you type it. Because we're programmed to actually pick up those things because we're taking in the information two ways, both through your hands and then actually while you're seeing it, while you're doing it. Whereas typing is something that's less of a it causes for less dexterity. Like, you don't need to use your hands as much in order to get out that information. Whereas reading takes in information differently than listening. And you have to ask yourself, as long as I'm getting the information, am I okay with that? Normally, yes. So then we're good. But, if you can take in the information through reading as well, because it engages you, and it causes more focus. Because that's the biggest thing with audiobooks. You can do other things while you're listening. And that's where your attention splits and you get less from it.
I just can't focus. Because I start getting on my phone, and I start doing stuff. Yeah.
Because, it's nice when you're like, I can listen to Michelle Obama's Becoming on audiobook. Like, that's great. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's a good way to go about learning her story. But I don't know. If Michelle Obama had written a thesis on XYZ thing, I don't know if I would want to listen to that on audiobook because she's going to have a lot of stuff to say that I have to digest. And that's going to take it up different.
No, yeah. Absolutely. So, you said that... So I think someone asked what this book was. I think The Laws of Human Nature by Robert Greene.
Yeah, Robert Greene is one of my favorite authors for various reasons, but mostly he also wrote 48 Laws of Power, Mastery, and this book and Seduction. And then he wrote a couple books that are around 48 Laws of Power. And my favorite book of his is Mastery, because I basically am using that as like a guidelines for my life essentially, which is a whole nother story. But yeah.
So I bring this up too because you said that you're gonna read it once a year.
Right.
What is your approach to reading? Like, you have a book here, James Baldwin book.
Yeah.
Right. And I asked you, you might show it to them.
Yeah.
Because this is James Baldwin, my favorite author. It's phenomenal. This book is over 900 pages, and you said, well, that would take you 3 weeks to read.
Yeah, about 3 weeks a month.
So I was like, how? In the midst of working.
Yeah.
Right? Having a life.
Yeah.
Having responsibilities.
Yeah.
You can read a 900-page book.
Yeah.
In 3 weeks to 4 weeks.
Yeah.
So talk to us about that.
Okay. So let's break this down, y'all. There are about 30-something days in a month, right? If you read 10 pages a day, you could read a 300-page book. Math, right. So if you could read 300 pages of book by just reading 10 pages a day, if I could read 20 pages a day, then I could read about 600 pages, right? Right. So then if I read about 30 pages a day, or 40, which is what my average is, if I'm really trying to read something, then I can read about 1,000 pages a month if I wanted to.
40 pages in one day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm about, where I land at on average is between 30 and 40 pages, right? Now, like, for instance, this week is light. Like, I'm reading this book this week.
What is this?
If y'all know, this is about designing for emotion. So I'm learning. I'm a designer again, and I'm learning how to make things that actually kind of like speak to people, because I actually want to build better experiences for people, specifically for like people of color and Black people. Eventually down the road, and technology is where technology is concerned. And specific to that, man, like, this is not a long book. This book is like 100-something pages. So I don't have to read 40. If I read 40 pages, I'd kill this book in three days. But I have a little bit of time, so I'm stretching that out a bit.
So what do you mean you have a little bit of time? You give yourself a whole month for a book?
No.
So so for a book like this, you'll give yourself a week?
Yeah.
So you'll read how many pages?
If the book is under 240 pages, it's a week.
Okay, so you I love how programmed you have this. Okay.
Yeah.
If it's less than 240, you give yourself a week.
It's a week.
And then you do what? 20, 30 pages a day?
Then it's about 30 pages a day.
Do you feel like that you lose something? Because let's say a chapter is 40 pages.
Mm-hmm.
So you just stop at 30? And
no, I stop at where I feel like. That's what I say about 30, 40. It depends on how I feel that day.
Okay.
Like, everything is not... I know it sounds very, like programmed and everything, but for me, it's like, if I read about this amount, like, I feel good about it, and I can stop at this today. If I felt compelled to read 50-something pages, which I have at times, like the book 1984,
George Orwell.
Georgia, amazing book. I read like 60, 70 pages.
I feel like that was like one of the first books I saw you post about.
It is one of the first books I posted about, and it was a phenomenal book.
Like that?
Yes, it was phenomenal. I love that book.
Yeah,
I love that book. I would definitely read that book again.
How long was it?
That book was about... That had to be like 400, 500 pages, something like that. I couldn't imagine being less than that. Maybe it was 300 to 400 pages. Let's say it's like 300 to 400 pages. And that book was amazing to me. So I gave myself 2 weeks on that book because it went over my limit of 240 pages. I was like, I can't read that in that amount of time. But I ended up finishing in a week and a half because it just got done. And with that extra time, I just either started on another book, the next book that was slated for next week, because I have my book slated out a month ahead of time now, or something else.
So I have questions. So you give yourself a goal then, right? Which is like, in this book, I'm going to read this in this amount of time.
I tell myself this. I'm pretty sure that I can read this book in this amount of time. If I can't, then I will see what I can do. But I know that I can read all these books within a month. So then I'm okay as long as I'm flexible with it.
So you plan it out by month?
I plan it out by month.
Okay.
So, like, for instance, if I failed, let's say like a whole bunch of stuff happened this week, and for some reason I couldn't finish this book, I'm not going to kill myself over trying to finish the book before Monday and to start my next book. Sunday to start my next book. I'll just read it on Sunday and read it on Monday. And then I'll start my next book after that. But I know that if I stay on my schedule, then I'll be fine. But I know sometimes I don't account for this. Like, I didn't account for this meeting when I did the book planning originally, right? But that's okay because I can still be flexible with my time because I know that even if stuff comes up in an entire week, I'll still go through and have enough time to finish it out because I have my weekends, and my weekends are my like saving grace. Because during the week, anything can happen. But on a Saturday or Sunday, both of those days are normally mine. And I make a time for it.
All right, so rewind. Someone said to repeat your limits. You just said a lot just now.
I did.
So let's rewind this. Talk to us a little bit about how you plan the month.
Okay.
You said your weekends are your saving grace. You also said that you didn't account for this meeting.
No.
So that presupposes that you plan like blocks of time.
Yes.
Talk to us. Yeah.
All right. So, I'll tell you what I'm doing for next month, right?
Okay.
I have 4 books. I have not decided what any of those books are.
Okay.
I normally choose what the 4 books are halfway through the month, right?
Okay.
So, and it's not always 4 because it might be too long of a book. So, I might not be able to finish it in time.
So, you might shoot for 3 to 4 books.
So, I might shoot for 3 to 4 books.
Okay.
Last month, the book was 600 pages long. I only chose 2 books.
Okay.
Right?
So, it seems like you have a page limit.
I have a page limit.
Yeah.
Because I know that if I try to read a 700-page book in 2 weeks, that's putting too much pressure on myself. I'm not going to enjoy reading this book.
Okay.
It's not about, like, I think...
I like what you just said, yeah.
I think people are thinking, like, Eric is trying to crank through a bunch of books. Like, no, I could comfortably read 40 pages a night. And it's really not a huge issue for me. But I also don't read 40 pages a night.
Yeah.
I read about 40 pages a night on average. But then sometimes on the weekend, I make up a lot of time because I have a whole bunch of time in the morning that I get myself.
But it seems that it's also, for you, it's not about cranking it out.
No.
If you said you want to enjoy the book.
Of course.
Yeah,
So
I think that's huge. I think that's huge, right?
Yeah.
Because I think sometimes people feel like, oh, it's like a burden.
Right.
Okay.
And to put it frankly, like, where people would spend amount of time like watching TV, I would probably read the book. Where other people spend.
So do you watch TV?
I don't have TV. I have Netflix. It's dope.
Yeah.
I have YouTube. That's cool.
Yeah.
And I have a game, but I don't play it all the time.
Yeah.
So I mean, like, most of my time is either like I'm working on a side project that's personal to me, or I'm reading something.
Yeah.
And a lot of my time right now is being spent reading because I have a gap that I would like to cover as far as my knowledge is concerned with my industry.
So you have 3 to 4 books a month.
Yeah.
And you plan Monday through Friday to read these books. And if you can...
Sunday through Saturday.
Sunday through Saturday.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And then you try to do anywhere from 30 to 40 pages a day.
If that's needed. Sometimes it's not.
Okay.
You know?
We have some questions real quick. Okay, so how can we use these reading skills to other subjects or jobs? I feel like we kind of already addressed that a little bit.
Yeah, but to real quickly hit back on that, like, for instance, if we're talking about for jobs, focus. Like, if you have to do something that's mentally challenging, and you're able, and one, it takes a lot of mental focus to focus on things you don't like, but if you focus on things that you do like, it's easier for you to build up an idea of what focus actually is. Like, I think people think focus is like looking at something really hard until something happens and everything like that. But being able to gain an efficiency and being able to lock in when you need to is hard. But when you could do it, it's like magic. Like, you could really get stuff done because you're able to be efficient in how you spend your time when you want to spend it that way. And the thing about work, the thing about work in general is that you normally have to spend your time the way somebody else wants you to spend it. And that's a very difficult thing to pair with. But if you're able to know for yourself, like, let me lock in now and get this stuff done the way that I want to get it done, then you have more flexibility within somebody else's constraints. And reading allows me to do that because I know how to lock in when I need to lock in. And I'm also learning about my industry constantly because I'm reading. So reading isn't always about actually the book itself, but the skills that I'm gaining in focusing, reviewing information, and being able to explain information, because I can explain all these books, and then being able to both decipher and parse out information. All of these things are required if you're going to be in positions that are not rote work.
Life, bro. Like, we live in a world too where critical thinking, I think, is definitely. I know it's definitely not taught in school.
It's not,
right? And reading
not enough.
All this stuff is just can allow you to just be more aware, to think more. You said you read something about somebody else's culture.
Yeah.
So now you're reading stuff about a different place in the world. So it's just this constant just knowledge and insight that you're gaining, right?
Yeah.
Real quick, I have another question. From Sierra, have you guys ever read more than one book at a time, or do you finish one book before starting another?
So I try not to advocate reading more than one book at a time, but I have literally been doing it since this year started, and I'm doing it currently right now. So I think you have to know what you can do and what your limits are. I definitely couldn't read 2 books at a time when I started this, and I'm talking about 6 months ago. 6 months ago, I don't think that I could read 2 books at a time because the ideas that were happening in both of those books were not coinciding with how I was understanding things. But now, I paired it up in a way where the books play off of one another. So I'm able to read 2 things and it's okay because I'm able to understand the things in tangent with each other. So, like, the 2 books I'm reading right now. I'm reading a book about habits and how you build habits and what that actually means, which is why I hesitate to say goals, because now I'm starting to understand things in systems and not goals.
Okay.
Right? But then also, I said earlier, I was reading this book on designing for emotion. So those 2 things don't contrast for me. It's like, how do I build up habits that allow me to design in a way that is more closer to the expression that I want to do? I'm really big on expressing. Both myself and other people expressing themselves, and I really want to express myself through my work, and I need to build habits that allow me to do that, because I'm at a stage right now where I'm good at what I do, but I want to be exceptional, and I can't be exceptional if I'm not building up habits to that effect. So when you can get books that play off of each other, beautiful, definitely do it. If you're the type of person that can hold more ideas and thoughts in their minds, great. I would also say that even if you're not, it's not the worst thing in the world if you do read 2 books at a time, because creativity happens where ideas that don't normally clash together come together. So sometimes it's a great idea to read books, but I won't advocate for it because everybody can't necessarily do both of those things and finish those books and gain something from those books at the same time.
It also depends what kind of experience you're trying to get. So Bill Gates talks about this, reading multiple books. He calls it synergy reading. Yeah. And he says that he's so busy all the time that he ends up accumulating all these books. Yeah. And at a certain point, he'll say, you know what, forget everything else. And he actually locks himself in a room.
Yeah, in a cabin,
and just reads everything. Yeah. And for him, that is, he enters a space where it's just the most creative that he'll ever be. That's what he talks about. And so when I found out about that, I tried it out. I got 4 books. I think one had to do with race, one had to do with the Caribbean, and I would read. I was reading 10 pages an hour from a different book, and I did it for I think a couple of weeks. It was weird, it was different, but it was dope. Like it was just a cool experience. Like I said, I did it. Now I'm like, I might go back to that at some point if I just feel like doing it. Yeah. But personally, I do prefer just to kind of stick with a book. Yeah. And then knock it out in a couple of days, go on to the next one. Yeah. And it's interesting. You'll actually be surprised at how fast you can actually finish a book if you actually dedicate yourself to it. Yeah. Like it's actually quite amazing.
I'm telling you, if you're afraid of picking up a book, I'm just like, yo, if you did 10 pages a day, even if that book is 300 pages, you finish it in a month. And a month is a good amount of time to finish a book because you'll have gone through some things that month, both good and bad, and you'll also be able to experience whatever highs and lows come with those books and the insights that you'll gain from it. And I think that's a good thing to happen over the course of a month. So,
absolutely,
stick with it.
We have a question here from Wendy, a high school student. I'm a high school student. My teacher every 2 months gives us a book, but some are not very interesting. How can I approach and make it interesting for me to read?
Okay, so normally, like for instance, I had to read Raisin in the Sun. I don't know if you ever have to read that, but it's like a classic. But at the time when I was reading in high school, I was like, this is whack. Like, I don't want to read this book. One thing that you can do when you're getting these books and you're having to read them and everything is to put yourself in the context of what's happening like around those books. And it's hard to necessarily do that when you don't necessarily know what's going on. And that's why we don't necessarily connect with those books all the time, because somebody's forcing you to do it. So I can't tell you to not read the book because you have to read the book. So if you have to read the book, one, you have to get yourself in the mindset of, I'm going to read this book, and be okay with the fact that you're going to read this book. Now that you have chosen to read the book and to actually go through and read it, what are you going to do with that information in order to understand that you can enjoy this book? Now, you probably won't enjoy it by just reading the book itself, because sometimes it's hard to grasp what's happening in that book if you don't immediately connect with it. The hope is that you connect with the book once you start to get the perspective of, I have an opportunity to read this book and to understand what's happening in it. But if you don't, then the best thing that I can say is to get with people that you know and friends that you know that are also reading the book, and then make something of it from that. Like, reading books with people is actually a really great experience because you're able to bounce ideas off of one another and to make it a thing.
It's a great point. One thing too that I do is this happened to me a couple weeks ago. I was reading this piece by this guy named Adorno. He was, I believe, German. He's talking about the overlaps of capitalism and the idea of culture, and it was interesting, but not really, because it was just so dense. Yeah. Like, I had no idea what the hell like he was talking about. So one thing that I did was I went and looked up book reviews of the piece. So it's like maybe 1,800 words, like a page and a half. And that kind of, the words that were being used in that article were just easier for me to grasp. I'm like, oh, okay. I went up and looked up YouTube videos about the book. I read some Wikipedia stuff. And what else? And sometimes, every once in a while, I also look up Spark Notes on the book, because that language tends to be more accessible. And once I understood more of like the main points, I'm like, oh, okay. I went back to read the book, and now it became more interesting. Yeah. Because now I understood a little bit more of what they were arguing. So these are like some tips and tricks. I would never substitute Spark Notes for reading the book. Yeah. Like, absolutely not. But yeah, it is a primer. It is an outline to help you if something might not be interesting, if you need help. Some people look down on that. I do not.
I don't.
I think the point is to gather knowledge to try to understand this a lot better.
Yep.
So
just don't lean on it, but definitely use it. Definitely use it.
All right, so we got a bunch of stuff. Let's kind of run through this.
Go ahead.
We have 10 minutes left.
All right.
Okay. Other question is, do you pick books from different genres to keep variety in your month?
Yes, I do. Definitely. I didn't always do that. At first, I was doing a lot with just nonfiction, but nonfiction books that were akin to what I was going into as far as like my industry. But I think that really diving into fictional books that start to describe stories and things that you haven't experienced before by really good writers can really start to open you up in ways that you hadn't necessarily thought about before. Because I do a really good job of staying on my P's and Q's as far as my profession is concerned. But I haven't really been doing the greatest of jobs of really diving into my personal self in these last couple months. And that's something that I want to return back to. And being able to read stories that are fiction has helped me kind of open that door back up again.
That's awesome. I was reading at one point only stuff on race. Just racism. And then as soon as I started reading some philosophy stuff, it just made me just think about race and racism in just such different ways. So just kind of putting all that stuff together was great to just kind of switch it up, keep me more interested, and just also just kind of keep me more aware. Let's see. Eric is saying he carries 3 books. Oh, sorry, another Eric. He carries 3 books at a time. I switch depending on my mood. It helps me read even if I start losing attention. Andy's saying, right? Yeah. I'm telling you, carrying books with you is an amazing thing. Yeah. I used to live on campus, so I stopped taking out my, like when you walk and just look at your phone on Instagram or something. Yeah. I stopped doing that and switched my phone out for a book. So instead of being on my phone, I was just reading. And I would knock out 5-6 pages on the way to somewhere. Oh, and quick side note, another reason why I could read a lot at night is because I have my phone automatically turns off all my social media apps at a certain time every single night. So I'm stuck with my books. Yes. It's screen time on your iPhone. Go to settings, put that boy on, and it's going to shut up all your stuff. Really? It's already in there. So you can't even click in it? I can click in it, but it prompts me. It's like, are you sure you want to break your time and everything? And I'm like, nah, I don't want to do that. Like, I'm good. Like, if I have to check it, I'll check it. But that's why people be sending me DMs at night. I'm like, I didn't get it. And I don't get it till tomorrow, the next day at 11. Like, I have my time set up where, like, my nights are really starting to wind down. And I don't put my phone next to my bed. Like, there's all these, like, little small things that I'm trying to do in order to kind of give myself my time back a little bit. And it's... You gotta fight for it, yo. You gotta fight for your time. We have 8 minutes left, so I'm gonna run through these things. Go ahead. Have you either of you read The People's History of the United States by Howard Zinn? If not, I recommend it. I've heard of it, but I definitely haven't. I've heard of it too. I haven't gotten to it. Have to get to that. Yeah. Andy's saying watching this while doing his English essay. Asked you if you've read Huckleberry Finn. I've read parts of Huckleberry Finn. Didn't it come out like there was like a lot of racist stuff going on? Yeah, I mean that's why I didn't get that's another. I didn't get through that book. Yeah. That's a great reason that. Yo, what is this? Yeah. Hey man, American literature. Chris killing it. Wish I had more time to pick up a hard copy and read. These days I listen to audiobooks on my long commutes to and from work. For them, it's just as effective. So just kind of I hear that. If that's how you get through your day and everything like that, I can't talk down on that because that's something that I admire. The fact that you would pick up and do audiobooks. Period. I love my hardcover books and I find the time, but everybody has different. I can't do audiobooks. I need the hard copy. So it just depends. Right? It depends on what you do. Yeah, absolutely. Sierra saying I read multiple books at a time, not in one sitting. Depends on what I feel like. One audiobook for commuting, and a hard copy of another book just works for me. Any recommendations on books for books on capitalism? I mean, anything Marx. But these are, I think, stuff like on capitalism. It's very difficult work to read. So I think it's important to read with somebody else, like Eric has been saying. To kind of help you read through this. There's this guy called David Harvey. He's a professor. He made a whole YouTube just kind of series, and they're reading Karl Marx Capital Volume 1.
Yeah.
It's like an 800-page book.
Ridiculous.
And he does a lecture on each chapter. So that could be very helpful for you. And I could also email you some stuff.
Yeah, I would just say, just really quickly, go back to the foundational text so you can know kind of, if you're going to talk about theory, so you can start with the base and then start moving more towards the modernist work forward like that. And not necessarily from. It's good to start on both ends, but have a base first.
Absolutely. People are saying thank you so much. Another Eric saying also reads PDFs on his phone.
Hey, look, get out you live. Like any way you can get the information, just get it. I just typed in the name David Harvey. Articles, books, all that
stuff. All right, Eric, we have 5 minutes left. This was really great. Yeah. Thank y'all so much for tuning in. Any parting words for the people? I hope they enjoyed this.
For sure.
Yeah.
Y'all, if you don't read books, that's okay. I'm not here to shun anybody. I'm not here to talk mess about anybody. But I will say that books have definitely changed my life for the better, and have given me so much in growth and understanding. And I'm very appreciative of it, that I would like for people to just engage in that and to understand a little bit more about how that might be able to help them. I don't necessarily know if there's a perfect book out there for you, I think there is, but I don't know if there's necessarily something that you need to do or to happen for you to find information that's really going to stick with you and speak to you. But there is something out there for that. And I will say, for myself, I didn't have a whole bunch of mentors just sitting around me and doing things. And one thing that I read in a book that I was just glancing about, and when I wasn't serious about it, was that books could be your mentors when nothing else really
Absolutely.
is. And I think that also comes from that Malcolm X quote as well, isn't it? So it's just using books as a proxy in order for you to get to where you would like to go. And trying to understand your why. And even if you don't understand what your why actually is, books can help you explore that. Nobody's going to tell you what your why is, and nobody's going to tell you exactly what it is that's going to speak to you and what's going to matter to you. But books will give you that spark for you to kind of start to understand those things and get to that point. So, explore that. Explore that and have that sit on your heart and hope that it guides you somewhere.
Absolutely. Man, one of my favorite James Baldwin quotes is, you think, you think your pain and heartbreak are unprecedented in the history of the world, and then you read.
Yeah.
So, reading is powerful. I love what you said, you're not going to sit here and make people feel bad if they don't read.
Come on, man. Yeah. Everybody doesn't have that ability. But I'm glad that people could really, who do have the ability to read, can read. And the people who cannot, I pray that you
and start small. There's no shame in that. Just start small. Yeah. One of the best first books I ever read was the autobiography of Malcolm X. That's told to Alex Haley.
It's amazing.
Amazing. Changed my life.
Amazing.
And very accessible language too. So I definitely recommend that one.
Yep.
Instagram, so again, Eric, thank you so much.
Thank you, man,
for being here and for doing this.
I appreciate it.
Y'all, I will be posting this to YouTube. It'll be on the Instagram story, so you can watch it again. And thank y'all. Have a good night. Whew.